I want to do a video, it'll actually be several short clips, about the different ways to join yarns when you are doing different methods with yarn. The first one is needle knitting, and these happen to be circular needles, but it wouldn't matter what needles you were using really. And you can see that I am knitting something. These are size 13 circular boys, and that my yarn, I have about, I don't know, 20 inches left. Now, to join a yarn when you're doing this, this is my new yarn all ready to go, and there's my old yarn. Now, you can tie a knot, but what ends up happening when you do that is you have a knot, and even if you do it well and it's hidden on the inside, a knot is always going to change the shape of at least one stitch. So it's better to do it this way. Excuse me. So here you are, you're knitting, you know you're getting to the end of your yarn, and all you do is take your new yarn, and I'm using 3 strands here, and hold them together. So for about, say, 3 or 4 stitches, you're going to have 6 strands of yarn. And you don't need to go any further than 3 or 4 stitches. So you just hold it together like that, and you can see it. You usually have to hold it close to the needle. So there's one stitch with 6 strands, and on this second stitch you can pull tighter. Don't pull too tight on the first one. And then a third stitch. So for those 3 stitches, and you can trim those off later, but for those 3 stitches, you see how they're big? That's actually better than having a knot that is going to pull, because the knot, if I had a knot, say here, these 2 stitches start to separate all the time. So now when you go to do the 4th stitch, you want to drop your old yarn. And you'll, if you do intarsia knitting, you'd be using this a lot, and it's just better to not get them tangled. It's just better to do it this way on any of your needle knitting. So now I pick up the new yarn, not the old yarn, and the old one will get in the way sometimes, and then keep going. So then you, when you trim the old yarn off, leave about 2.5 to 3 inches, and that just falls to the inside. It's much less bulky than a knot. So that is joining a yarn when you're needle knitting. I'm doing a video on different ways to join yarn with different methods of using yarn. And this isn't yarn, it's Gimp, but because you can do Gimp stitches with yarns, I'm including this in the video. So this piece was black and white, and then blue and yellow, and now I want to make it blue and white. Now this particular one is on a keychain, and when you start a new Gimp piece, normally you either do a first stitch around a keychain or you tie a knot at the beginning and work from there. And when you tie the original knot, you end up with 4 strands like this that you're working with. This is a Gimp Spiral Stitch. So now, when you want to join a new color Or say you want to make something that's 24 inches long, and you don't want to work with 10 feet of gimp at a time, which you can do also, by the way. Then what you can do is join the new colors to the old colors. Now these black and white spare ends will get trimmed off, and so will these blue and yellow after I move to the blue and white. So here's a stitch, the last stitch I've worked. It's fairly loose. Now we can't really tie a knot to start a new color, but what we do have are 4 strands. So to make it easiest to see, here's what the next stitch would look like. And these are like an aqua blue. I would go up, then over to the left, then down, and to close the stitch I would bring this other yellow piece through like that. So there is the next stitch. Now I can do it 2 ways. I can either hold these new strands together as I do that, or I can slide them right in now. So let's make the white go with the blue, and I want to pull through a new strand, but I want to leave a little bit like that, and that will get trimmed off. So that's one blue and white. The other one has to go with the other blue path. And you will have to hold this all in your hand, and it's a little bit iffy when you first do it, but it is doable. You just want to keep them all where they're supposed to be. So pull that white through, and now the new blue ones will follow the path of the yellow. So on this one stitch, I'm going to have, instead of 4 strands, I'm going to have 8 strands following 4 paths. And I know that's a little bit difficult for you to see, but I don't want the whole thing to fall apart in my hand. This first stitch is the one that takes the most patience. Okay, so I have the new strands in place with the old strands. This yellow one is the one that wants to move. Now this is not going to work. I can already tell it's starting to try to fall apart. And you have to leave enough, like on this white one, so that when you pull it, you're not pulling the new strands all the way through. So pull your original colors, which are the yellow and the like aqua blue, and then you're more likely to see where the new colors are and how they're sitting in there. It is tricky. I've done it a lot. It just takes a little patience. So I've done a new stitch. The stitch is correct. At this point you can pull your actual stitch with the yellow and the blue, and the only one that came out was this blue one. So then you can just check, where does this have to go? So that goes with that, and this, oh, the white one came out too. So we have to slide the white one back in. And if it's easier to just slide them in like that, you can do that too. Okay, so now using your original colors as your reference, which are the yellow, the aqua blue. Make sure you have them lined up, and then pull it tight. And so you have just added a new color to your gimp stitch. This particular stitch is going to be hard to get tight, and the white wants to come out. The other thing that can be involved in this is when different brands of gimp are slightly different diameters, so that can affect it. So the stitch is correct, the new colors are there, and you have these four straggly things, which are really your new ends. So the only thing you have to do now is the next stitch, but hold the two colors together. So this is technically my aqua blue, which has to go that way, then my yellow, and it looks confusing, but it isn't. My aqua blue again, which just went over there. And then the yellow, which has to go through right over here. So it's easier for me to do this without trying to do it in front of the camera like this, because I have to grab it tightly. I may move this up a little bit and leave a longer end. But that's basically how you join gimp, a new color of gimp. And if you want to leave these long so they're sticking out, you can, as long as you realize that you'll be pushing them out of the way when you make the stitch. So where is the other white end? So again, remembering which colors you were using and pulling it tight. And this one white one keeps wanting to come out. It takes patience. It's not difficult at all. It's just a little bit confusing to look at when you're doing it. So there we are again. And I have everything lined up the way it's supposed to be. Now, what I do is 3 stitches like this with the 2 colors. And see, that's the problem. You just need to get it tight enough so that you're actually able to work this stitch. And keep the 2 colors together. And even though the blue and yellow, the yellow are kind of short pieces, if you can keep them the older color that you're actually changing from, if you can keep that involved with at least 2 stitches, it's better. So now you just have to pull it all tight. It looks messy, but it's not as messy as it seems. I just want to find out where that one is. And see, that's coming off the first stitch. This loop shouldn't be there, so I have to fix that loop. So now, this is not complete, but now I pull all of them tight. I'm not sure. Okay, so that wasn't really a loop. Now this also is going to make this 2 or 3 joining stitches, like I said, they're going to be thick. But do you see how it's doable? It just takes a little bit of patience. And sometimes you can't work the older color in for 3 stitches. But as long as you get it in there for 2 of them, this will all hold together. So pull this as tight as you possibly can. And so I've got white up here is the new color, blue, white, and blue, and the tight stitch. So this is the 3rd stitch, and like I said, I won't do the whole stitch because I still have to pull that a little tighter. But if I can keep this aqua blue involved, fine. If not, don't worry about it. So now, and this was a little bit sloppy, you can see it's a little bit loose, but I wanted to show you how to do it. So I can either go back and tighten it by undoing this stitch and starting over again, or I can just live with the fact that that is loose right there. But when you do it with concentration, you only see a little bit of a bulge, and this is 3 stitches with 2 colors there. So this one is a little bit loose. But that is how you join a new Gimp color to an old Gimp color to continue making a project when doing the spiral stitch. I'm continuing with the Gimp for a minute because I want to show you something. So this is what I did in the first part of the Gimp joining. And I actually did pull this out and go back and make it all tighter. And now I would trim off all of these loose strands. But because it was difficult to see what I was doing, and that it was going to fall apart, I just want to give you a visual of how to put the new color strands in when you're doing this. So you want your final stitch of whatever color you're using to be slightly loose, like that. And then you take your new colors, and let's do dark blue with white. And the camera's shaking because the dog's moving around a little bit. And you just want to slide it on the path you want it to go on. So we've got the dark blue with the white. And the dark blue with the white. And then we're going to use this beige color to go with the light blue. And it just got a little darker in here. Let me turn the light on. Okay, so now your 4 new strands are with the old strands. And when you go to actually do the stitch, so there's 1, 2, blue and white, beige and blue, blue and white, and beige and blue. So you have 2 strips, 2 colors in each path of the stitch, and from this point the best way to do it is to just complete a stitch holding 2 at a time, and do that for 3 stitches. Then you will have to push, and I'll take those back out again. You'll have to push the random strands. You'll have to push these out of the way as you start to work. You can trim them off right away, but I leave them on there for a while because Gimp tends to settle into the stitches, and also every once in a while I'll pull it out and settle it back in. So I wait to trim these off. You can trim them off as soon as you're done with the, I guess I could call them tabs, but the ends of the old colors or the spare ends of the new colors. So you loosen the final stitch of your old color and then add your new color on each of the 4 paths that the Gimp strip is going on. Okay, I'm continuing with methods of joining yarn when you're doing something, and this one is a Lucet. So here is what I've been working with, which is like a magenta pink acrylic, I think. And Lucets are very easy to join a new color or to change colors. And of course, it'll depend on whether you want to make your cord thicker and leave a second color on, or whether you're just changing colors. So you have your 2 Lucet stitches, and I always leave my Lucet so that I'm going to start a stitch on the right. And all you do with a Lucet is just put the new color in here as a loop. The dog, her back hurts, and so she keeps shifting around, and keeps hitting my elbow. So you put the new color like that, and for 3 stitches, hold it with the old color, and you'll have 3 stitches that are double strand. And you just want to make sure they both get pulled tightly together. So there's 1, 2, 3, and at this point you trim off your old color, which is the magenta, and get that out of the way. And, you know, leave both of these loose ends, just keep them out of the way like that for a moment, and then you just start with your new color. Now, that happened because I have to actually pull that short end of the magenta for at least one stitch to get it all tight. So now I'm on the coral color. I don't want that magenta in there twice. Now if I had left the magenta attached to it, I would have just been increasing the thickness of my cord. And this one loop is probably from a short piece. So that I could have done a little better. Pull the short piece of the coral color in the stitch prior to this one. But the actual changing of the yarn is not difficult at all. So you just stick your new color through the loop, do 3 stitches, and then trim off the older color. And like you just saw, see, this is shorter, so I have to pull that, but I don't want to break the yarn. So you may have to pull the shorter ones for a couple of stitches, but it's very simple to change from one color to another, and you will have 3 stitches that are a little bumpy. I'm continuing with a video on joining yarns, and now we're at spool knitting. Now, a lot of times what people do with spool knitting is just tie a knot, because the knot ends up in the middle of the strand. There are times, though, when the knot just won't sit in there correctly. It depends on how thick of a yarn you're doing. If you're doing a very fine yarn, almost always the knot is going to stick out. This is a fairly good join. This is a vintage strand that I knit when I was about 7, if you can believe it. So this is how normally, if you're in a hurry or you are working with worsted weight or heavier, you tie a knot, and then as you knit, the knot ends up inside, like this, because you knit right over it, and it pushes it inside. Sometimes it takes a couple of stitches, a couple of rounds to get it to stay in there correctly. You can also take the back end of your, see how it goes right in most of the time? You can also shove it down like that to keep it inside. This is a light DK or a worsted weight yarn, and I just want to get some yellow on here. I'm not even going to comment. It's just, you know. So there's the knot again. And this is why that happens. See how it's going to stick out now, even though it was in there? Let me do another round and you'll see what I mean. Here's the knot sticking up right there. And so depending on the next round, and if I wanted to change colors now, I would actually have 2 knots right near each other that would stick out. So at this point, you have to make sure it goes in the middle. So this is a lot of thinking just for a knot. And it will go in there, but it may come out again. So if you want another way of joining yarn, it's similar to the Lucet, and we'll do it on the next peg, where you want to pull your stitch out a little bit and just stick your new color right through the loop. It's one of those days where the simplest of things is just not. So there, you just pull, and then you can pull your yarn tight again. So now, again, same as with the Lucet, you leave that extra strand like that, and you just do 3 stitches that have the 2 colors together. So you will have 3 stitches that are a little bit thicker and that have 2 colors. And now you would cut off the yellow, leave that hanging, and just work with the new color, which in this case is magenta. Looks like I skipped a stitch over here, so we'll do these 2 together. Nope, that was the first one with the 2 colors. So now, as you pull that down, you're going to end up with these 2 going down with it. You have 3 stitches, which is enough to secure the new yarn. And when you get it through the knitter, you can just trim those 2 pieces off. And then you're not worried about knots. You have a smoother finished strand. Now, a lot of people do these just because it's like busy work. I'm actually thinking of doing a Christmas stocking made with these. And possibly a hand puppet, a sock puppet. So there are more things that you can do with these than you would think with spool knitters. There's a lot more than rugs or pot holders and stuff like that. So that is how to join a new color without tying a knot on a spool knitter. Any size spool knitter. This is the last example of joining yarns that I'm going to do on this video. This is a granny square with a crochet hook that I've been just worked up in a hand spun yarn, and that is a brown acrylic that I need to add to this square. And there are again, a lot of times people just tie knots. It depends on what you're making. If I'm making a rug and I don't care about the knots, I will trim the old yarn, tie it to the new yarn, put a knot there. And then anything with a knot would be on the floor side, so you wouldn't see it. But another way to do it is to it's very simple. It's similar to knitting with needles, where you just hold the 2 yarns together, the old and the new, with a long tail on the new yarn, which you see in the brown there. And with granny squares, I'm doing double crochet, and you just hold the 2 yarns together and do 3 of your stitches. You want to make sure you grab that first in this case, first brown one. So there's one, and then pull that tight, 2. And again, you're going to have a little bit of extra yarn on these 3 stitches. But what you won't have is a knot. So that's actually your joining. Now this is the worsted weight yarn is a little bit heavier maybe than the hand spun anyway. So then you trim off your old yarn and get that out of the way. And this is the funny thing with hand spun with spin.minute. It just wrapped itself completely around the new yarn. So we'll leave that for a minute. And then hold your the tail of the new yarn and the old yarn that you just cut. Hold those out of the way. And then just start working with your new yarn. And what I like to do, look at this mess. This is because the hand spun wrapped around the other yarn. What I like to do, if I can get this stitch done, it'll be surprising. I'll have to cut that off of there. I like to do this on whatever corner I have started the Granny Square corners, because that way you also have a symmetry if you're doing an Afghan, say, or some big granny square as opposed to little granny squares. For changing colors, say you're making 4-inch granny squares and you use 2 colors, it blends in more subtly, believe it or not. It looks more natural, more of a variegation, instead of having a big knot sticking out. So then, when you get everything done, you can just trim both of these off and continue. So that's joining yarn in crochet.